For our last read aloud this week, let's finish chapter 10. Our teacher steered us to some books and websites, and the rest of the study period passed in a flurry of actual study. Cha-Cha and I didn't have a chance to talk at lunch because there were too many people around, and because Franklin Freeman, who didn't usually babble as much as his little sister, went on and on about the record cold snap, clearly worried about what it could mean for his family's maple syrup harvest. "If the January thaw doesn't arrive soon, it's really going to affect the flow," he said. I had no idea what he was talking about, but everybody else at the table nodded sympathetically. This entire town is obsessed with weather, I thought, and frozen waterfalls and maple syrup. After lunch, it was time for science class again, where it turned out our frog reprieve had only been a temporary one. "Saddle up, cowboys," said Mr. Bigelow. "It's showtime." I explained to him about how I'd already dissected a frog earlier this year back in Austin, but if I was hoping that he'd let me ditch the lab and go to the library instead, no such luck. "Terrific! You'll be an expert then." He steered me to the table where Jasmine and Cha-Cha were sitting. Franklin and Lucas were stationed on one side of us. Scooter and Calhoun were on the other. "You ladies are the roses between thorns," quipped Mr. Bigelow. He trotted off, returning a moment later to place a tray containing a dead frog on the table in front of us. "Ew!" squealed Jasmine, recoiling, and Cha-Cha mimed sticking her finger down her throat. "Courage!" our science teacher told them, plopping trays with more of the limp green specimens in front of the boys. As soon as Mr. Bigelow's back was turned, Scooter grabbed his frog by one of its hind legs, then leaned over and dangled it in his sister's face. Jasmine shrieked and batted it away. "Scooter!" Both the dead frog and Scooter were back in their proper places by the time Mr. Bigelow turned around. "Is there something I need to know about?" he asked, frowning. Scooter blinked at him innocently, his face as devoid of expression as the frog's. "Just that..." "Forget it," said Jasmine. "Brothers," she muttered to Cha-Cha and me as our teacher walked away. "Tell me about it," I replied. "I have 2 of them." Picking up the lab instructions, I began to read them aloud. "Too bad there isn't an app for this," I grumbled when I was finished. Cha-Cha surreptitiously whipped out her smartphone and tapped on the screen. Actually there is." Jasmine's dark eyes lit up. "We should totally use it." Mr. Bigelow materialized behind us like a genie summoned from a lamp. "No, you totally shouldn't," he said, plucking the cell phone from Cha-Cha's hand. "You know the rules. You're doing this old school, ladies." "But why should some poor frog sacrifice his life for us?" Jasmine protested. "It's inhumane." "It's for a worthy cause," Mr. Bigelow countered. "Try and think of him as a little green hero sacrificing his life for science." "A little green hero who smells revolting," Jasmine said, making a big show of holding her nose. She picked up the scalpel with the other hand. "This is just gross." Behind us, there was a loud thud. We turned around to see that Lucas had fallen off his lab stool onto the floor, and his face was nearly as green as the frog on his tray. Scooter and Calhoun burst out laughing. "Shut up, you guys, it's not funny," cried Cha-Cha. Mr. Bigelow rushed over and helped Lucas sit up. "Deep breaths now, son," he said, bending him forward just so his head was between his knees. "You're okay. You just fainted." While Lucas was recovering, Cha-Cha rummaged in her backpack. "Maybe this will help," she said, holding up a bottle of Sassy Lassie perfume. Jasmine and I stared at her, puzzled. She gave us an impish grin and tapped the lab sheet. The directions don't say we can't." She gave our little green hero a couple of vigorous squirts, then leaned over to the neighboring table and sprayed Lucas's frogs too. My eyes watered. I wasn't so sure if this was an improvement. Mr. Bigelow shook his head wearily. "And to think I could have had a career in research." He flapped his hand at us. "Fine, just whatever works." 45 minutes and half a bottle of Sassy Lassie spray later, the dismissal bell rang. "Well, I hope I never have to do that again," said Cha-Cha, hopping off of her lab stool. "Me too," echoed Jasmine. "That's what I said last December," I told them, stuffing my notebook into my backpack. Lucas Winthrop, who still looked half wilted, trudged along ahead of us as we went back down the hall to our lockers. "Poor kid," muttered Cha-Cha. "Wait until his mother hears about this." Jasmine nodded. He'll probably have to start wearing a protective helmet to school or something. I smothered a giggle. Maybe having a busy mother who didn't have a whole lot of time for me wasn't such a bad thing after all. Can you believe I have to go back to the orthodontist again today? Jasmine complained, pulling on her jacket. Stupid wire broke. It's poking me on the lip. Her cell phone buzzed as she answered it. I'll be right out, Mom. No, Scooter says his braces are fine. She waved to Cha-Cha and me. Gotta run. See you guys tomorrow. As she jogged off down the hall, Cha-Cha and I joined the flow of students heading for the front door. Are you kidding me? I said in disbelief as we emerged from the building. The sun from earlier in the day had disappeared and it was snowing again. Welcome to winter in New Hampshire, said Cha-Cha, sweeping an arm out in a dramatic gesture. Blam! A snowball hit me squarely between my shoulder blades. I whipped around to see Scooter and Calhoun standing there laughing. Calhoun had Lucas Winthrop dangling by one of his spindly arms and was busy stuffing snow down the back of his neck. Welcome to winter in New Hampshire, truly gigantic, Scooter called, mimicking Cha-Cha's sweeping gesture. Truly big mistake, Metal Mouth, I called back, furious. Two could play at this game. Scooping up a handful of snow, I took aim at Jasmine's brother. Blam! My snowball hit its target, exploding into a zillion bits. My counterattack wiped the stupid grin off of Scooter's face. Calhoun let go of Lucas and gaped at me, shocked. Take that, I thought smugly. Cha-Cha darted over and grabbed Lucas by the hand. Run! She shouted to me. The three of us took off down School Street. Scooter and Calhoun were hot on our heels. I paused a couple of times to fire off more snowballs for cover, then rounded the corner of Main Street behind my new friends. We dove through the door of Earl's Coins and Stamps and stood there dripping in snow and panting. May I help you? Said the man behind the counter just as Scooter and Calhoun charged through the door, snowballs in hand. The store owner was pretty spry for someone his size. In a flash, he had both boys by the collar and hustled them outside. Sorry, Mr. Jefferson, said Cha-Cha when he returned. We got ambushed. I can see that, he replied, eyes twinkling beneath a pair of shaggy dark eyebrows. He was pretty much shaggy all over, from his wild tangle of curly hair to his rumpled sweater and corduroy pants. No bird for Mr. Jefferson. He's a bear. So, is this just a safety zone? Give you kids time to catch your breath, or can I actually do something for you? I looked over at Lucas, then at Cha-Cha. We couldn't very well toss Lucas to the wolves. Scooter and Calhoun were no doubt waiting outside, itching for revenge. We'd have to let Lucas see the envelope. I fished it out of my backpack and slid it across the counter. I'm wondering if you can tell us anything about this stamp. Well, let's hope so, Mr. Jefferson said cheerfully. Stamps are my business. So are you Earl? Well, technically speaking, yes, but everybody calls me Bud. My father was the real Earl. This store was his baby. And you're Lovejoy, from the looks of you. Was that obvious? I nodded. Yes, I'm truly Lovejoy. There's another one? His shaggy eyebrow shot up. Your Aunt True and I went to high school together. Well, welcome to Pumpkin Falls, truly, or perhaps I should say you're truly welcome to Pumpkin Falls. He grinned at his own joke. We're all delighted to hear about your dad and True taking over the bookshop. Not that we won't miss Lola and Walt, he added hastily. Picking up the envelope, he examined the stamp. Oh, sure, I remember this one. The Battle of Gettysburg. This is from the Civil War series about 20 years ago. He spun around and ran a finger across the notebook's lining in the shelves behind him. Ah, here it is, he said, pulling one of them out. Rifling through the plastic sleeves it contained, he pointed to a pristine horizontal strip of stamps. Cha-Cha leaned in to take a closer look while I jotted down the year. There's President Lincoln, Harriet Tubman, Ulysses S. Grant, she noted. These are actually kind of cool. Mr. Jefferson nodded. I like to think so. My father collects stamps, Lucas suddenly piped up. That's right, said Mr. Jefferson. He used to spend a lot of time here. The two of us were real good friends. Cha-Cha had told me that Lucas's father died when he was a baby, which I guess kind of explains a lot about Mrs. Winthrop being so overprotective. You're welcome here any time, Mr. Jefferson continued. Lucas stared at the stamps. My mother likes me to go home right to dinner after school. I understand, the shop owner told him. My door is always open. Lucas nodded. I would have liked to stay and look at more stamps. Cha-Cha was right, they were kind of cool. But I was due at my tutoring session in 5 minutes, and my father wouldn't be happy if I was late. The three of us thanked Mr. Jefferson and left. I looked carefully both ways to make sure Scooter and Calhoun weren't lurking behind a mailbox or something, then motioned my friends to follow me across the street. So did that help? Cha-Cha asked. I guess, I told her. At least we've narrowed it down to a date range. 20 years ago is a long time, though, Cha-Cha said. The person who wrote that letter and the person it was meant for might not even live here anymore. I nodded. Yeah, I know. It's probably going to be impossible to track them down, but for some reason, I still want to try. As we approached the bookstore, I noticed a man in the dark, green hooded jacket peering in the window. He stepped back, started to walk toward Lou's diner, then hesitated. After a moment, he returned to the window and peered inside again. That's odd, I thought. Before I could say anything, though, a snowball came sailing out from behind a parked car. Incoming! I hollered and grabbed a hold of my classmates and pulled them into the bookstore. That is the end of chapter 10, and we've had a development, a clue about this envelope. So, what happened in the book, what's happening in your head, and what's happening in your heart as we finish this chapter.